Happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room, episode number 296 on May 31st, 2023. My name is Jason Neiffer, and I am the Executive Director of the Montana Digital Academy, which is Montana State Virtual School, located on the beautiful University of Montana campus right here in Missoula, Montana. And joining me tonight in apparently snowy North Carolina, it's Dr. Wes Fryer. Good evening, Dr. Fryer.
Good evening, Dr. Neiffer. I just love living in this aspirational cabin. So I need to find the same cabin without the snow, I guess, because it was like it's 70, whatever. It was 75 today. Just beautiful. We've had the most mild. I mean, this is our first time to be in the Carolinas for the spring, but from what folks have said, it's been wonderfully mild. We've had rains and, the harshness of the humid summer heat has not set in yet. So anyway, it's a lovely day in the Carolinas, and today was my last day of official duties. We have to be available for the week for other meetings, but we had a department retreat today, and my grades are in. And anyway, now I've got to design 2 courses and completely transition to Canvas this summer. So there's a bit of work to do, but there are no more students to teach, and I don't think there's any more meetings to go to. So yay, 10-month teaching contract.
I am incredibly jealous. So do you report back then in mid-August then? Is that when you'd report back then?
We do. Now my wife, last day with kids is June 9th, and she goes through the 12th. There's only 3 people that listen to this, so I'll say it out loud. She hasn't announced it on Facebook to the world, but she had resigned maybe even 2 months ago, not knowing where she was going to go, but she has accepted a position to actually be a 5th grade teacher assistant at my school at Providence Day. And one of the benefits of that is she just gets to show up and love on kids, and really will not be having to get up at 4 a.m. every day of the week, every weekday. To get things ready as she has for the past year. So anyway, state testing is going on, but I don't think we're here to necessarily go into all those details. Although I've said a lot of personal. So Dr. Neiffer, tell us how is the kitchen going? Did you guys do a whole revamp? What is the status of the Neiffer kitchen before?
It is 97% done. So we've got 2 things to do left. We ordered a center overhead light. We have a little you would have called them 15 years ago, can lights, right? But they're not can lights anymore because of the availability of newer technologies. But we have basically 8 can lights up in the kitchen, and but the overhead center light is kind of dangling from a wire up top, and so we have a light fixture that we'll have installed the next couple of weeks. And then we've picked out which we have a kind of a little breakfast bar in the kitchen, and we've purchased we found stools we like. We just need to purchase them and have them delivered. So we've been cooking a lot in there the last 3 months, and even though the process was pretty arduous, and I think I mentioned on the podcast that we had a water issue with our dishwasher that created all sorts of mess and was pretty frustrating to deal with, but in the end, the kitchen's really easy to cook in, and we did hire a professional designer to write up a plan for us and didn't try to design it ourselves. And the benefit of that has been that her experience made sure that the so-called work triangle of the kitchen is muy bueno. So it is really great to cook in. And my wife and I were even talking about a couple weeks ago that neither of us can believe that either of us are saying this. But it's also a lot easier to clean up the kitchen because of how well it's set up. So we're really excited about it. We've cooked pizza twice now, which is kind of I
saw some social media pictures of that. So that looks pretty good.
That's one of my ways of kind of breaking in the kitchen, and it's pretty great. So yes, awesome. Thank you for asking. Pretty awesome.
All right. Well, what are we going to do besides recount a little personal updates as we usually start the show? No weather tonight, but what are we here for?
Well, we are going to take a look at some news from the last couple of weeks and kind of shoot it through the educational prism. Our topics tonight, obviously, will deal with AI, and that might suck up some oxygen in the room. We also have a couple of interesting Google articles, some social media news, some Apple news with WWDC next week. So I imagine that next week we'll be talking about new Apple stuff. I have an article under bad idea department. And then we'll end our topic this week with the geeks of the week. So, Dr. Fryer, I know you added in a couple articles tonight. Where would you like to take us first?
Oh goodness. I don't know. This is kind of a personal one. But sign of the times. This is Engadget from today. The first gen Chromecast is no longer supported, and that's actually kind of amazing because the first gen Chromecast came out quite a while ago. I think over 10 years. We talked about this in the context of Internet of Things. That we really should have a mindset of not keeping. It's not like buying a shovel or a rake that you're going to, or whatever, some kind of garden implement that you're going to hold on to forever and you're not going to need to upgrade. I mean, buying technology, we know this for laptops and desktops and things like that, and phones, but for other things too. And so actually this impacts us because I have had several first gen Chromecasts. And I guess they had announced this in April. And basically, it doesn't mean it stops working. It's not bricked, but there's not going to be any more updates. So, I don't know. Yeah, the danger and risk of something like this. I mean, there is the hacking and personal information issue, but it's probably more like if something would be compromised and become part of a botnet or something like that, it's probably going to be fine. I don't think we're going to disconnect our Chromecast right away. But Dr. Neiffer, I think you have some Chromecasts as well as Apple TVs, maybe? What's your status of Chromecast? And have you upgraded to faster ones that are, higher performance?
Yeah, most of the Chromecasts that are left in my house are Chromecast audios, which haven't been supported for some time. But what I would say is that they are working pretty well still, and I have a couple plugged into into a full stereo setup with the big speakers and the old-fashioned amp and receiver, and that works pretty slick. What I would say is that we decided to invest in the Apple speaker. When we bought the big beefy one, the Generation 2 big beefy one, because we figured nice kitchen, nice speaker, and that's been a pretty solid investment because it is really, really impressive sound audio. And since and this is the most famous last words maybe I've ever uttered about tech, since since I don't anticipate leaving the Apple ecosystem, right? Like that doesn't mean I won't use other computers or buy other computers, but that's where I think my main world will be. I don't anticipate moving away from that. So Apple TVs are set up on both of the TVs in our home, and then otherwise I have access to a Amazon Fire TV, and then I also put a link in to our show notes. There's a really great alternative if you don't want to stick with the no longer supported Chromecast. That is the Walmart on Android TV box, and this is a $20 box. This is the 2023 version of that. And the benefit over the Chromecast is it works just like a Chromecast, and you can cast to it from Google and iOS devices, but then you also get the benefit of having the Google TV software on there. So it works
for $20?
For $20.
And you have this, you're running?
I do have exactly this, as a matter of fact. And so much so, hello.
My wife's disembodied hand appears.
And I can actually, my dog is getting confused because he thinks I'm going to get up and play with him now. This is and I bought two of them because I did put one at my parents' house. The spare bedroom I've been in lately has a TV in it, but didn't have one of these boxes. So I picked one up in Great Falls and stuck it on there. But this is going to be the one I'm going to throw in my office specifically because of the Chromecast capability, but it also has, the full Android TV experience and a remote control. So I would say that if you are, looking to upgrade, or you have security concerns, or if you'd like something that is, a couple steps ahead of just plain Chromecasting, then I would say the on Google or Android TV from Walmart is a pretty good $20 investment. And despite the cost, it's pretty snappy and also works on a 4K television.
Man, that's pretty interesting. We use ours basically just as a digital picture frame.
Yes.
We've got two inputs. One's the Apple TV and one's Chromecast. But generally, most of the time, I've got the Chromecast on there. Having the Google Photos rotating through. Can you do that on that Walmart $20 one as well? I mean, just use the photos.
That I'm not sure about. It may have that somewhere in the settings, because I think that is standard on most standard Android TV boxes, but I don't know the answer to that. That said, I will be in Great Falls this weekend and be utilizing that television, so I'll play around with the settings and see what's up.
It's interesting because I don't know if you've traveled with wanting to travel with like, hey, let me make my hotel TV, stream. Maybe you've talked about that, but it can be a little tricky because you have to connect to the hotel Wi-Fi and getting all that, set up.
The way I do that is, and this is one of the great benefits of, at the risk of just starting a nerdy old discussion.
That's okay. We can do whatever we want to with this show, I think.
Yeah, totally. I'm a T-Mobile customer, as is Dr. Fryer. It's been one of the best moves I've ever made, service-wise, tech or not. But I get, I do buy a premium service there, and I get 40 gigs of hotspot data there a month. But the other thing that I also do is, I think I've talked about Visible before, which is a service of Verizon, and Visible allows unlimited data for $25 a month, includes unlimited hotspot, but the hotspot's limited to 5 megabits down, 5 megabits down. But what I've noticed is that just because of that Wi-Fi issue, it's pretty easy for me to just set up my phone in hotspot mode in a hotel, and it's going to use a lot of battery, but I'm in the hotel, right? This is the size of that Android TV box. It's pretty svelte. I also usually carry a small, like 1 foot or 6-inch HDMI cable with me, so that it's not taking up a ton of space in my bag. The only thing I don't like about this on device is that it uses USB micro USB and not USB Type C. And I would imagine that was a cost decision. It probably dramatically decreased the cost of the power for this thing. And so it means I have to bring this with me, because I don't carry any micro USB cables with me anymore. So I have to carry the power thing with me. But this is all you have to carry with you, along with your HDMI cable in your travel bag. And I just have a little bag that I stick in my or a little zip up bag that I stick into my suitcase when I'm traveling, and that's how I access television when I'm on the road. I haven't decided. My wife and I are going to Europe at the end of June. We'll be spending almost a week in Sweden, and then almost a week and a half in Berlin. I haven't decided. We're gonna carry on our bags, which is a kind of a whole different thing than checking a bag, because it means that we have to be much more svelte, and I have to carry all my medications and medical stuff with me, and I'll also be carrying a laptop because I'll need to keep an eye on email while I'm in Europe. So I don't know if this will make the bag or not, but that's my strategy right now for traveling and getting access to stream television.
That makes me think of like going to ISTE or whatever, and sort of the Road Warrior supplies, and like, here's all the adapters and things that we're doing. So maybe you could do that before you go. Like, here's what made the final cut for Iceland.
Totally.
Do you want to do that ex-Googler one? Is that a 2023 or 2022?
It's a 2022 article, but it was the source that I thought was really interesting there. Search Engine Journal reported on, this would be November 30th, that ex-Googler Marissa Mayer, who you may remember was the CEO of Yahoo that was going to try to bring Yahoo back to life and wasn't able to do so, at least in the way that a lot of people hoped. Talks about why it seems like Google search engine results are getting worse. And the article, gives her the appropriate credibility. She, was employee number 20 at Google, has a big engineering background, worked on Google Images, News, Maps, Gmail. She was in charge at one point at Maps, local, location services, so she knows what she's talking about. And plus she ran Yahoo too, which itself is a content a discovery engine. But she talks about one of the ways that she thinks it's getting worse, and it's because she says the web itself is getting worse and there's more junk content than ever before, and there's an awful lot of disinformation. So it's hard sometimes to divide up the difference between legitimate sources and illegitimate sources, and also get past the clickbait and get past the click farm articles and instead get to the correct information. And the reason why this article was so interesting to me is that here we are in a world where people, not all people, but some people are starting to rely on AI as a search engine, which I think is a mistake, right? Like AI is not a search engine, nor should it be considered a search engine. And yet here we are in a world where our arguably, almost not arguably, the best search engine is having a hard time connecting you with the right answers. And so the pollution of the internet continues.
But thankfully, Jason, Sydney is here, and so she's going to save the day for all of us. Actually, yeah, I think AI. And have you played much with Bard yet?
I have, but what's really funny about Bard? I like Bard, but I don't really understand. Maybe it's not turned on, but all the new features they talked about at Google I/O, they don't seem to be part of my Bard experience.
Yeah, I have not played a tremendous amount with it. So it's but yeah, I think undoubtedly search is going to be affected in some significant ways by AI, but the AI is definitely going to be increasing our disinformation. So that was a 2022 article, and it's even worse now.
Yep. Totally
I'd like to drop down. I put one under tech correction, and this is an issue that I actually learned about at our retreat today. We are about to kind of go from 0 to 60 with esports, with a wonderful new hire that's going to be doing esports as a lunchtime and after school activity and competitive, and then eventually with courses. This is a PC World magazine from January of 2023. And the headline is, Europe is ready to crack down on loot boxes and exploitative game mechanics. It has been a while since we have talked about Roblox and other games, and we've talked about the intersection with students and safety. But there are some big issues with exploitation of child labor and the way in which some companies, Roblox would be one, basically make their own exchange rate, have their own currencies, and in some cases, people have argued, set that whole economy up in ways that are very disadvantageous, certainly to students and folks with less financial resources. What I was brought to my attention, and I think this is talking about it here, is now when you are playing some games in Europe, they are required by law to let you know, like when you're buying, I think this is, and I'm going to very easily show you my ignorance when it comes to online gaming, but like with Madden, for instance, and some other games where I think you're able to buy these packs and try to get cards, like in the United States, you have no idea what you're going to get. This is like regular slot machines. We have regulation in casinos for slot machines to try and make sure that the house isn't stacking the deck, the odds so much in their favor that you have absolutely no chance at all of winning. And I'm saying this is not as somebody who's like super knowledgeable about all of these kinds of things, but I did, live in Oklahoma for 16 years, and we had over 100 casinos. This is something that gambling in various forms, is probably more pervasive now than it has been for a lot of reasons. But anyway, I thought this was kind of interesting, showing how Europe is under a different regulatory regime when it comes to these requirements. And so apparently you will know my percentage of getting such and such card or whatever when you buy this, if you're playing in Europe. But there's nothing like that in the United States. And one of the things that we were talking about today in our retreat is it really is very much a Wild West in terms of rules. And there's just really virtually no regulation about that at all. So connections to technology and kids. I'm going to be creating my intermediate coding curriculum for next year. It'll be a new class that I'll teach both semesters. Going to be having my kids, create some animations, create some games. I'm faculty, a sponsor of our middle school gaming club. And one of the things I want to do more of is have a chance for kids to share a little bit of games that they're playing and any tips and tricks. But there's definitely pitfalls. Anyway, I found that fascinating, and it does intersect with what we've talked about before in terms of tech correction and privacy, and how Europe with GDPR is in a different place than we are here in the United States. So, are you a gamer, Jason? And do you spend literally thousands of dollars trying to get that one Madden player so that your weekend gaming experience, you're going to have the right team to take on your competitors?
I'm not regularly a gamer, and I would say that if anything, the last couple of years I've become much less involved in games. But I will tell you that I did for many summers, going back to like 2017, play Tap Tap Baseball, which is a very fun game. But what I also figured out over time was that you could invest a lot of time in it and get a lot of good players and become a stronger, better player. Or you could spend about $25 on various upgrades and then have a lot more fun playing the game early on. And that's not a wild amount of money, but what I would also tell you is that I question whether I would have bought the game at $25, right? Like if the game came fully loaded with those features, if I would have slapped down $25 or not. Also back in the day, I used to be super into the game Two Dots. I played it like obsessively all the time. And I also spent a fair amount of money on power-ups and upgrades that made that process a lot easier, especially when I couldn't get past a level. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And it's just funny because you may remember the mobile revolution. I guess it would be 13 years ago ish when the App Store became a thing, right, on iOS, and it just seemed like it was free games everywhere all the time. Now it's pretty hard to find a fun game anywhere on the App Store that doesn't utilize in-app purchases.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's one more link that I'll put in related to this. And again, this is just something that we happen to talk about at our retreat. And, esports is big. I had reached out to you, Jason, it's probably a few months ago, remembering back to the Moodle Moot. And let's see, it was Doc, who was the closing keynote. Who was
Doc Searles.
Doc Searles, yeah, with esports,
from Boise State, yeah.
Boise State, just amazing. This is a study, I think that was July of 2020, loot boxes in online games and their effect on consumers, particularly young consumers. This isn't something that I'm living in a lot right now because, hey, we don't normally have kids in the home at all. We're really not gamers, but, gaming is a massive industry. Esports is a huge thing in schools, and it's just, continuing to, I think, grow in popularity. And the intersection with, perceived needs for regulation and the potential dangers when we don't have some guardrails and things like that in place kind of a common denominator between those. So again, I hadn't planned on that being a huge topic, but that was an interesting thing touching on educational technology in the online world and regulation and things like that I had not thought of before. So
Yep.
where would you like to go next?
Well, let's do. I mean, there are some good, interesting AI articles this week, but right now, frankly, I'm feeling a little tired of AI. So let's do a couple. Maybe let's talk a little bit about the upcoming Apple stuff. So there was an article that was actually from Mark Gurman in April that I've seen referred to a couple of times about what's coming up at WWDC next week. And my understanding is that there's likely to be quite a few new pieces. First, well, I'll just tell you what Mark Gurman's list is from Bloomberg. The virtual augmented reality headset, or mixed reality is the term I see in a lot of Apple articles. That's likely to come out, and it's being touted as the first new Apple product category in nearly a decade. Of course, they're forgetting the AirTags, which I think are pretty great, but still a new big category. There is likely to be a new operating system for that device, plus new MacBooks, plus iOS 17, plus iPad OS 17, plus Mac OS 14, and then a major watchOS update. And I also believe, based on some of the Twitter traffic I've seen from reliable leakers, that there's likely to be a desktop upgrade next week. So there's a lot of folks, and there's been a ton of interesting YouTube articles about why people think that there might be a Mac Pro, a Apple Silicon-based Mac Pro coming. I've heard a lot less hand-wringing over the last 12 months about limitations in Apple Silicon that might prevent a Pro model. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that might look like.
One thing you don't see in this list is an M3 processor, and I had seen something about that not being a part. Are you thinking any of these announcements may affect your pocketbook?
No, I mean, part of it is that, and I've actually seen a couple articles about this. One of the reasons why the M2 chip based MacBook Airs, for example, aren't flying off the shelf is because the M1 is just a very satisfying hardware platform, and I feel zero slowdown on the two M1 devices that I have. And not that I would have felt a slowdown for a 2-year-old Mac, pre Apple Silicon days. But the bottom line is that I just don't see this hard. I mean, I might upgrade because that's kind of the way I am, but probably not this generation. And I could see these platforms being, my major daily use platforms for some time to come.
Yeah, that's good. Well, here's an Apple article that we've carried forward from a couple weeks, and this is super interesting from a privacy standpoint. This comes to us from the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which incidentally, we had talked about the, it wasn't really resignation, but the withdrawal of her name of an FCC chair, and part of what she was criticized for was for being a board member with the EFF, this very, far out there group. Anyway, I think they do a lot of good work. The article from May 17th, 2003 is How to Enable Advanced Data Protection on iOS and Why You Should. And the article explains that Apple has, until now, just secured data when it was in transit, meaning that it is moving from your device to Apple's servers. And now you can have complete encryption, end-to-end encryption, because if you don't, then Apple can, quote, read your mail and read anything that you have. And so there has been a lot of, court battles and fights for this. There are positives and negatives. If you are a real, supporter or even involved in homeland security and law enforcement, you might see this as a bad thing to have such a boost for user privacy, because it's going to mean that when people turn this on, not only Apple is not going to be able to, readily read whatever is in your iCloud backup and the data that they're storing, but security agencies that are going to, I mean, hopefully through subpoena, it could be through other means, request your stuff, are not going to be able to read that. So the article goes down the steps of how you can enable what's called advanced data protection, and recommends that you should do this on all your devices, your phones, your iPads, your Macs. Once you enable it on your account, then it's going to take effect across all the Apple devices that you own and that you are logged into. You do have to make sure you have two-factor authentication enabled, but I didn't even think you could opt out of that. Apple is really, really, I think, strong when it comes to their multi-factor authentication. So, Dr. Neiffer, is this tempting to you? Have you already enabled this? Beat me to the punch? Or do you think this might, just be something a little bit for the fringe geeks out there, who I'm sure we have some of them listening to the show?
Well, I mean, I don't have this turned on, and I was just kind of looking at my settings in my phone to see what it would take to set it up. And I would need to spend some time with this before doing it. But I mean, the bottom line is that, if you're working in any way in a professional capacity, right, chances are you have data on your phone that's embarrassing to get hacked. And I'm not trying to argue that I'm a target or that Dr. Fryer's a target. I mean, I would never be so presumptuous, but it would be, I imagine both of our phones would be treasure troves of embarrassing information, not about us personally per se, but about, the people we work with. And we've talked about in the past that the problem with student data is that, the problem with student data is that we are, we traffic in it as educators, right? And there's a lot of it around, and it's relatively low value data, except that it's really embarrassing data and can be used to create a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So I'm interested in this, and I think that it's pretty incredible that Apple's thinking in this way, because I think that they are really at the forefront about how to lock things down. I was just looking on my phone. There is another mode that you can put on that I'm trying to remember where it's at, but it essentially is a security mode. If you think you're getting hacked, or you think that something really bad is happening,
like a lockdown mode or something.
Yeah, maybe it is lockdown is the way you call it. But what's amazing about that is that, and it says this is like, if you have national security information or you think you're the target of international actors, this is a way to immediately and dramatically shut down your account, or lock it down. That's pretty cool that that's available to you. And I think that's something that, sets Apple apart. I'm traveling to Europe in a couple weeks, and I'm thinking about security, like what happens if my phone is stolen. I'm not really worried about the data on the phone, but how do I get back into my accounts? And what about two-factor authentication and all those things that are a part of this process? But the bottom line is that, even if you leave in a relatively undramatic life, and here I am, a virtual school administrator, your data is still valuable to someone in some way, some form. And so being aware of these products and thoughtfully turning them on, I think, is a really great idea.
On a practical note, I would caution everyone to make sure that you've got some open storage available. I'm actually right now with video. I did a video about pulled pork today, and had to delete some stuff off my phone to be able to have enough room to export a new iMovie. Typically, whenever you turn an encryption algorithm on, it is going to require more storage on your device. So be aware of that. That you're gonna, you may need to clear some data off, and your phone can, or your computer, iPad, whatever. The rule of thumb used to be like 10%. Keep 10% free. Otherwise, you're going to run into some difficulty. But the other thing that I would say about this is, make sure that you have a secure passcode on your phone, and just keep in mind how incredibly important it is that you keep that phone secure and protected. Because if a bad actor does obtain that phone, be able to get access to your text messaging, to your email, I mean, those things are really the keys to the kingdom when it comes to bank accounts and all kinds of things. And you may, again, wonder, well, I'm not running for office. I'm not a public official. I'm not a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. But, all of us have funds and resources. And again, the phone, somebody said the other day, probably with every single one of us, there is more confidential, private information that could potentially be damaging for a bad actor to get on our phone than we might even, have today in a home office, in terms of passwords and things like that. So take security seriously, and we'll be interested to hear kind of what you end up doing for your European trip. And that's good to see Apple moving in this direction. Again, it took a court case and a lot of fighting on the part of the EFF and other groups, I think, to be able to get that. But I think this is positive.
Great. Thanks, Wes. Hey, one more article I want to cover. This is under social media. I thought I had put this in last week's news, but I don't think I did. This is the Surgeon General has released a report warning that social media may harm children and adolescents. And I will say that I'm sharing a gift link here today, so you can get to this article even though it's in the pay-for New York Times. But Dr. Murthy, the U.S. Surgeon General, cited a quote-unquote profound risk of harm to adolescent mental health and urged families to set limits and governments to test tougher standards for use. And what's interesting about this has become a bipartisan issue, which I think is actually very encouraging that we're looking at it in this way. And it doesn't necessarily mean that both sides are maybe looking at it from the same perspective, because I don't think necessarily that they are. But I am very interested in the fact that people are starting to collect the research and aggregate it and come to conclusions which suggest that in his report, there are ample indicators that social media can also have a profound risk of harm to mental health and well-being of children and adolescents. And it goes to put forward what may sound like some old-fashioned strategies, but I think are very smart, including creating a family media plan that sets the expectations for social media use. It recommends keeping family meal times and in-person gatherings free of devices to help build social bonds and promote conversation. And I would never, ever presume to judge another parent's parenting. But at the same time, I think there's enough research now to say that if you're not inserting yourself into the social media conversation with your kiddo, and also, regulating devices, even if you yourself have a problem with devices, and to be frank, I do. I mean, I'm working on it, but I do. I think it's important to be very thoughtful about how you insert these into your life, and I think there may actually be some bipartisan support to trying to figure out a way to regulate these platforms, if even just for the youth.
A couple other excerpts from that article. It cites a Pew Research study finding that today up to 95% of teens use at least one social media platform, and more than a third say they use social media, quote, almost constantly. They also, in the previous paragraph to that one, talk about the TikTok ban in Montana, which again is going to be something real interesting to watch in terms of the courts and how that's going to be handled. TikTok's, of course, filed a lawsuit. Utah in March was the first state to prohibit all social media services, to prohibit them from allowing users under 18 to have accounts unless the parents give explicit permission. Now that, I think, maybe goes into effect. It does go into effect in the future. It may be January. And I think that Montana's law has graduated as well, from what I've understood. Like, if you have an existing app and whatever, you can still use it, but it's going to stop new downloads. But anyway, all of these things, as you say, are pointing to some pretty significant recognition of social media impacts. There's some different reasons for this versus, Chinese-owned TikTok versus, looking at the effects, as a Surgeon General is, on mental health and relationships and things like that. But I think these are important topics for us to stay abreast of. Certainly our students, have, depending on the age that we teach, a high level of interest in social media apps. TikTok. I did not do this lesson, but I'm excited. Next week, actually on Thursday, I'll be flying to Seattle to this University of Washington 2-day webinar on Finland's media literacy education program. The Center for an Informed Public, which is sponsoring that, had done a webinar with the TIP teachers, which is Teachers for an Informed Public. Anyway, it was a great lesson using TikTok links and asking students to apply the SIFT web literacy framework, et cetera. And so anyway, this is great stuff to stay on top of. And we don't want to delve into state politics deeply, but do you have anything that you would add or any other insights, Jason, that you've had on any of those with Utah, Montana, or anything else in terms of those laws? And do you have a prognostication for what you think is going to happen? Because I kind of guess we're going to have federal ruling on this that's going to limit how many states can just sort of go their own way and make it crazy for companies.
I honestly am so confused about the TikTok issue personally that I'm not. I have a hard time even commenting on it, to be honest. I like TikTok. I think it's a fun platform, and I would say that's introduced me to an awful lot of conversations that I would have never had an opportunity to discover before, because I think it's a really great discovery engine. But it's that same reason that people are concerned that its data is warehoused in someone that might be labeled a foreign adversary. And I'm not entirely sure that my data might be all that useful to a foreign government, but I'm sure there are people's data that is. And also it could be an engine for propaganda, certainly. And there's all sorts of things swimming around TikTok about, why we shouldn't ban, or maybe we should be more careful about it. But what I would say is that I don't want the politics of this stuff to get in the way of a substantive discussion about social media, where we're going, and if we've made mistakes in the way we're implementing it. And I don't think, and Dr. Fryer and I have only been on each other's radar for 7-8 years. So I don't know what your advocacy looked like in the late 2000s. But what I would tell you is that I wanted to bring social media into school. And my guess is that you had the conversation too, not because I want to bring social media into schools. It's because if no one's inserting an instructional voice into that conversation, it runs wild on its own. And I used to participate in, there's a big parade in Helena every year. School is off. It's 2 days of merrymaking and parade creating. And for students that weren't going to make a float, they were in school on a day where instruction wasn't happening. And I was part of a series of workshops for kids called the Vigilante Academy. The name of the parade is the Vigilante Parade. That's correct. There was a parade based off vigilantes. So welcome to Montana. But
wow.
Yeah,
that is a cultural, a little unique.
Yeah.
Unique.
And I just realized I wasn't going to say the name, and then I realized I had to talk about the name of the piece. But I used to teach workshops every year to students on tech topics, and this is when it's early days of Facebook. Students had to lie to get on Facebook in some cases if they were young enough. But I walk the walk and try to have really good conversations with students about, you want to be really careful. You want to be very thoughtful. You don't want to be friends with everyone. You want to figure out where your data is going, and, be careful about sharing pictures, and, be very thoughtful about that. And I also remember in professional development workshops I offered on early social media platforms, and this seems almost quaint to mention now, but after Rupert Murdoch bought MySpace, I argued it's the best voter file ever because it would provide a lot of data on potential voters. And what happens in 2016, Cambridge Analytica is not only taking your Facebook data, it's also taking the Facebook data of your friends and used to target disruptive advertising in a very negative way during the 2016 election. And I really think we need to have a lot of big discussions about this and not get not get too distracted by the politics. Like I think it's a bipartisan moment we should take advantage of.
Agreed. On a related aside, since I just tweeted that link to the Surgeon General article, interesting that the preview for the article, which now that I'm like cross-posting to 6 different platforms these days, notice this because some of them will ask you to, do you want to create a link card for that link that's going to show? Anyway, it just has a nice little icon of a gift, and it says gift article. So that's kind of cool that, anyway, it notes that. So if you're wondering, ooh, it's New York Times, I'm not going to be able to click on that. It tells you that it is. Yeah, I think that everybody, all of our schools need to be doing some level of parent education and parent outreach when it comes to digital citizenship, media literacy, but especially around internet safety. And I think that, we obviously, maybe it's not obvious, but we don't need to be waiting for the government to mandate these things. We need to be having limits and restrictions. And I think a couple of weeks ago, we talked a little bit about AI companion apps, and I still haven't delved into that much, but if you need to have some restrictions on the App Store if you've got young children, grandchildren, and just as your first article with what Marissa Mayer was talking about, the web changing, and that's not only true for Google search results, that's also true for the amount of the potential for objectionable content that students might accidentally or intentionally stumble upon. So, all right. Well, what else, Dr. Neiffer? We have got about 14 minutes left or so.
Sure. Let's let's do a couple of these AI articles. There was a really great article that I saw kind of passed around social media the last couple of days, and I think it was originally on this week's Twit. It's where I first heard about it, but it is an article from the MIT Technology Review from October 2017, called "The 7 Daily the 7 Daily Sins of AI." The 7 Deadly Sins of AI Predictions. And what I loved about this article, and I've read it a couple of times now, is that it is pretty accurate now that we're like stewing in AI related stuff, right? And so I'll start off with AI. Well, let's just go through the 7 deadly sins of AI prediction. The first one is the sin of over or underestimating. And they start off by quoting Roy Amara, who is someone I think we've actually talked about on the podcast in the past. But his notion is that we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short run and underestimate the effect of it in the long run. And if there were truer terms ever said, it's also so true about almost everything in EdTech, right? And I think AI is a pretty good indication of that. I think we are overestimating what AI looks like, or what AI is going to do. And what I would say is that my mind keeps spinning around on this. I have colleagues that have challenged my stance on this, that have changed my point of view a bit. And also I'm a nerd, right? So I see this stuff, and the holy dog exclamation that tends to come out of my mouth when I see some of this stuff working sometimes, stops me from thinking critically about how some of this stuff is supposed to work. But I do think that's exactly what's happening right now, is that, we're talking about all this stuff and coming to a school near you or coming to a classroom near you. Oh my God, all kids are going to cheat with it, yada, yada, yada. When I do think there's probably a much longer term perspective that we need to be cautious about. So thoughts about that, sir?
Yeah, I don't know, the news cycle, and was one of my colleagues at school was commenting on just the last 2 to 3 weeks. It seems like every ad he sees, and there's just so much mention of AI, and just the hype cycle is at all-time levels.
Yes.
I think that we need to be having informed conversations about this. I reached out to the Senate Judiciary staffer who had tried to contact me. I had reached out to our senator who's nominated our daughter for the Air Force Academy, and thanked him and said, hey, I have a podcast and tend to monitor these things about big tech. Do you have any, citizen groups that talk about this? We're rescheduled now, I think, for 2 weeks from now to have a conversation. One of the important things, and I'll do another article here that'll relate to this. We need to be pushing to look into the black box. There are certain government agencies and organizations that cannot use AI data at all right now because of their own rules and regulations that say, if you can't tell me how you got this answer, if it's just a black box, it can't be used. And so we have, some additional conversation about AI researchers and AI developers doing that. But I think that is going to be an important element of regulatory enforcement and regulatory push for developers to, not just have this magic result that, oh my gosh, it says this and we have no idea how. Where did that data come from? One of the new articles that I put in, but wasn't just a carry forward from last time, and I've ran out of gift links, Dr. Neiffer. So if you've got a gift link for this one and you want to do that one, feel free. This is from May 30th from the New York Times, and talk about the hype cycle and the catching headline. AI poses, this is a Kevin Roos article, by the way, who does Hard Fork that Jason and I both like to listen to. AI poses risk of extinction, industry leaders warn. And so this is an open letter from leaders from OpenAI, Google DeepMind, Anthropic, other AI labs, really a lot of people. Did I just lose my video? I think I did. Sorry. My phone died. I should have plugged in my phone. Sorry, folks. I'll be done. Can you show me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a one-sentence statement. The statement is, quote, and this is what all these hundreds of people who are pretty big AI researchers have said: mitigating the risk of extinction from AI should be a global priority alongside other societal scale risks such as pandemics and nuclear war. More than 350 executive researchers and engineers working in AI have signed this. So, in terms of hype cycle, this is I probably a year or so ago, or I don't know, not that long ago, I didn't really know what existential means. It means, species ending, humanity ending potential. There are less, like there's a professor at Cambridge and probably other places too. Like, all he studies are existential risks, from asteroids that can potentially hit the Earth to other things. So 350 folks agreed that this is a statement that they can agree with. So we need to have some kind of regulation around this. Everybody seems to agree with that. We're not at the point where it's posing an existential risk, but it is a bit crazy that many folks that are super smart about this topic are in agreement with that single statement. So,
well, and I think that part of what we need to be very cautious about is the speed of which people are plugging this into other systems, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think we're being very thoughtful about this, right? And everyone is trying to, add the word AI into things without thinking about what it means or thinking about where we go next. And the bottom line is that we are. I mean, there's going to be a reckoning about this, right? I'm hoping it's not a science fiction reckoning. It's more or less another reckoning. But if you need any evidence about, that the disruption is now, whether we like it or not, look at the Writers Guild strike right now, right? And that's not world ending, right? But it does, create upheaval in easily one of the largest industries on earth, the television movie industry. And I happen to be with the writers on this one, that we need protection in Hollywood for writers to not be replaced straight up by AI bots, right? And that doesn't mean there's not a role for AI, and that doesn't mean at some point AI couldn't create compelling content. But the bottom line is that it's already happening, and I question some of the ethical pieces about forcing voice actors to sell their voice or to get a job in 2023, or the image of someone who's not with us anymore and it's owned by a family or by a corporation, being utilized in that perspective. I'm not sure if that's right or wrong. It feels wrong to me, is my gut reaction, but we have to talk about that stuff, right? And we have to have very thoughtful discussions about where this is going to go next. And I'm not sure, where I would come down on that if I really thought through it.
There is a podcast that we have carried forward a couple weeks that I want to give a shout out to. I'm trying to see if this is actually posted. No, I did record the AI podcast at school last week with the OpenAI employees who graduated from our school, along with a couple other folks. This is a podcast from the Center for Humane Technology, which brought us the documentary, The Social Dilemma, last year. They have also created, and I will admit I've not yet watched the whole thing, The AI Dilemma, but this is from May 11th, 2023. It's called Spotlight on AI Myths and Misconceptions. And in this entire conversation about the hype cycle and what is it that we need to be concerned about, what are the issues, I think this is an outstanding episode. And some of that is to sort of lower the hype level in terms of how panicked we need to be, but it is serious, and there are these real risks. And one of the things that this brings up is this idea of alignment and misalignment, and I've heard that on a bunch of podcasts and in a bunch of articles, and this is about aligning to values. Like, AI aside, we're having all kinds of difficulty figuring out alignment of values, right? When it comes to politics, when it comes to social media platforms, when it comes to things like, acceptable use and censorship, or just content moderation, which sometimes is the same thing. It just kind of depends on who's saying it. So it is a messy world. But I definitely feel like the velocity of this has just been stunning. And I think all of us in school next year, and this year is just wrapping up, we're going to be contending with AI to a greater degree. And we're also going to be potentially augmented ourselves as teachers, to a greater degree. And we need to be having these kind of conversations. Where does this fit in the curriculum? Because guess what? I bet you may not have many classes, if any, unless it's a current events class, or a class like media literacy that you're going to be talking about contemporary technology issues. Where does that fit in the curriculum? It's something that needs to be discussed and explored, and I think that we need to come out with some clearer guidelines than we have right now about attribution of AI when we use it. But then also, thinking about how we're going to potentially change our assessments, recognizing that at least at this point, with ChatGPT 3.5 being freely available to just about anybody that wants to use it, it's going to be a big part of the landscape for students and the creation of certainly traditional essays, but a lot of work.
Yep, absolutely. Well, one last quick article, Dr. Fryer, and we can call it a week here. This is from the New York Times on May 27th. I've heard this from several media sources, and there were a couple of videos on YouTube and TikTok about it. But here's what happens when your lawyer uses ChatGPT. And a lawyer who's representing someone suing an airline relied on artificial intelligence to help prepare a court filing, and it did not go well. Quoting from the lawyer's name was Roberto Matta. Actually, now I'm mixing up the article, but basically he put a bunch of citations in the brief, and they based on ChatGPT, and ChatGPT completely made it up. Right? Like, they looked like citations, they sounded like citations, and the lawyer was Stephen A. Schwartz, and said that he hoped that the court would understand his mistake, and that he was very apologetic, and basically violated all sorts of legal tenets, because one of the things you do when you submit a brief, and that's part of your oath as an attorney, is that you promise that the citations say what you say they say, in part because you can't look up every citation. You know, there's some that are obviously very frequently cited. Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, for example, right? But you know, when you get more nuanced, you have to rely on the fact that lawyers are citing citations that are relevant. In this case, they weren't just not relevant; they were completely and utterly made up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that may be self-critiquing for that lawyer because, like you said, if you're whatever, you can't just blame ChatGPT. It was ChatGPT, maybe do it. No, you're the lawyer. You're the
No,
one that's using it, and if you're using evidence that's fabricated, then you should, face consequences. I want one more request. You did a bad idea department article. Can you go ahead and do that one quickly, please?
yeah. This is from Reuters. Elon Musk's Neuralink, which is a direct connection between a gadget in your brain, has received FDA approval, and for its first in-human clinical trial. Apparently, this is at the same time that the FDA is also scrutinizing Neuralink's use of testing in animals. So what I would say is that, I mean, this is obviously a very future-looking technology, but in light of the fact, I guess I'll go ahead and say it, that Elon Musk's way of fixing Twitter was to fire everyone, that maybe don't stand in line for this device to start with.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
Right. All right. Well, we have talked for an hour and 1 minute. I think we probably better do some Geeks of the Week and get out of here. So,
Sure. Well, I got a quick one to share. This is an AI tool that I was introduced to a day or two ago that is pretty interesting. It's, of course, unpronounceable. The name of the tool is Knowledge. But it's a really interesting platform that allows you either automate it with AI, but what I like about it is you can do it manually and use AI assist to take a text, a YouTube video, pictures, or other media, and turn them into what they call a micro lesson. So the way I did this was take one of the Crash Course Causes of World War I videos. Crash Course, a very well-respected, student-friendly piece, and I pasted the URL of the YouTube video in it. It read the transcript. It rewrote the transcript as a pretty decent text article, right? So it put it in paragraphs and added headers so that the transcript itself was pretty useful, and then created a series of higher-level learning questions, multiple choice questions, puzzles, and assessment tools based on that, which you could then export into a learning management system like Google Classroom, Moodle, Canvas, etc. So again, I'm not sure where I stand on generating classroom content with AI, because I think it's pretty early days, but I like the notion that yes, you could automatically create it, and that's interesting, but more importantly, you could simply help it automate your process.
awesome. I'll do two quickly. I had a chance to hear one of the grandparents of a current student at our school who is a property investor give a fantastic presentation and shared a wealth of GIS, Geographic Information System tools, many of which are specific to the Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, which is around Charlotte, North Carolina, where we live. But there's many others as well. And so I just created a wakelet of those resources. There's, I think, 19 different things. And it's just kind of amazing. I mean, especially like the timeline tools and being able to just, ratchet this slider and, oh, wow, look at how the roads and buildings and things have changed, whether that's about your school or your own property. But he does a lot of research as he purchases both mainly residential, but sometimes commercial properties. And then this one I wasn't actually going to do, but I just saw this and I'm throwing it in there. This past weekend when we were up in Front Royal, Virginia, we had a chance to go to the church that our daughter's been attending this last year. And learned about a whole wealth of different resources. And this is one that I'm really excited about. It's called Coming to the Table. And the intersection here, potentially, I'm thinking might have to do with digital storytelling. But the subtitle here is Truth, Justice, and Healing, Working Together to Create a Just and Truthful Society that Acknowledges and Seeks to Heal from the Racial Wounds of the Past, from slavery and many forms of racism it spawned. And it's a nationwide organization that has local groups. And in our polarized times, I think this is a pretty interesting and important initiative. And I think there's probably some intersections for digital storytelling there. But obviously there's a lot of politics that are related to even saying that we had, slavery in the past. So we will not dive into that deeply, but I think that's worth checking out if anybody's interested. So I think we've done it, Dr. Neiffer. We have successfully talked amazingly for another hour, and we did not cover all the articles.
Yep. Even though we had less articles this week than we usually do. So, hey, Dr. Fryer, where can people find you on the internet?
I am still on Twitter at WFryer, but all of my links are at wesfryer.com/after. And I have been doing, as usual, quite a bit of cooking and probably going to do more of that also throughout the summer. How about you?
Well, best place to find me is probably still Twitter, Tech Savvy Teach. Mastodon's not really catching on for me. I may double down again, but I don't know. Maybe I should just get off of social media altogether. So, hey, this is not complaints about social media. This is the EdTech Situation Room. We're a once a week podcast on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and sometime in the middle of the night UTC. And the reason why we're going to find that out is we might do an episode when I am in Europe in a couple of weeks. But we really hope you join us live. But if you can find us wherever finer podcasts are aggregated. Our website edtechsr.com, YouTube, Facebook. And really just type EdTech SR into Google, and you'll find all sorts of places to catch up on our feed.
And it will be interesting to watch the Apple event next week, right? Is it Tuesday?
Yes.
Right? From not only the digital storytelling standpoint, because Apple always does a masterful job. What are they going to say about AI, right? And will they say things? Because we just haven't heard a lot from Apple. So we'll probably talk about that a little bit next week. Sorry.
That's great. So, hey, join us next week to hear about us talk about Apple, talking about AI, and we hope you have a wonderful week. Good morning, or I'm sorry, have a great week. Good night.
Good night, everyone. Stay safe.